First, I always have to adapt the microphones because I'm really short. Give me a second. Got it. Yes. Okay. Indigenous speaking language. Good afternoon to everyone. I am pleased to be able to greet you and visit you in your land. I am very honored to be here today. I'd like to ask if they could put play my presentation. The initial salutation was in mixe, my native language, or ayuk, like we say in Mexico.
La presentación de
My PowerPoint presentation, please. Perfect. What I'm going to present to you, he presented me as an engineer. I am now being educated I want to present to you a native maize. Normally we see native maize not as a technology. We believe that technology is only those things that are generated in a research center with a scientific center. What about all those knowledges, local knowledges that have coexisted for thousands of years in our communities? Next, please.
el tema de seguridad alimentaria se ha tratado de resolver.
Food security is an issue. It's a constant problematic worldwide. Yeah. Research centers have tried to work with technology. The modern technologies, we could say that Green Revolution and the technologies that were promoted had a positive reach in some regions. It's also been very much criticized because it reached to exclusion of many agricultures, especially those who have low income. Also, environmental deterioration and the loss of diversity. But I wonder, is everything always black and white? No. There might be positive effects, but also negative effects. Particularly in Mexico's case, and I could say Latin America, most part of the projects of agricultural projects of food security has been perceived from the productivist point of view. Improved seeds, chemicals. Well, what about the local knowledges? In the particular case of Mexico, how is it that the traditional knowledge has coexisted with native seeds, because they continue to cultivate like this in Guatemala and many regions of Latin America also, and it's part of the sovereignty of our peoples. Normally, especially for people that work in anthropological fields or development fields, I continuously come across that there is a trend to make dichotomies, traditional and modern. What is traditional? What is modern? Can they coexist? Those two things. Well, let's see. Well, the next. Native maize in Mexico. Native corn in Mexico. In the case I present, I take it as a technology because, like this, it allows us to guarantee our food sovereignty, but also it is connected to our story in a different way. I'm going to tell you. For example, my grandmother, she was a spiritual guide, and within her knowledges, to do, like in all some regions, they use ayahuasca or peyote or the fungus. In my region, the spiritual guide is done through corn, and it was a native corn that was inherited from one generation to the next. The food, I don't know, the people that is from here, from Guatemala or from Peru, they could say we're very much accustomed when we have such a delicious food that sometimes the varieties are the ones that we use for certain foods. Like in the case of Oaxaca, I can tell you, atole, we don't make it with a blue corn. We make it with white corn. Pig tamales, we don't make it with white corn. We make it with blue corn. Like this, we go having a distinct relation that not necessarily can be touched. It's not tangible, but is interconnected with the life of people. Native maize in Mexico is part of a system much more complex.
Ustedes también tienen milpa.
A system that we call milpa. There's not only one type of milpa. We have a big diversity of milpa. Milpas are adapted to the conditions, specific conditions of each region. On one side,
selección de las
when we do the selection of the seeds, it is related on our preferences and how we grew up and the traditions we inherit from our parents. In a particular case of Oaxaca, I can tell you that our milpas have pumpkins, potatoes, different types of corn, beans, even fruit trees. And we produce that will allows us to maintain along the year. But is it only that? Is it just a system? No, I mentioned before about the social tissue and the relations that we have with corn. Next, please. The history I want to present to you today
tiene que ver en
is related in a Zapoteca community in Oaxaca. One of the questions I had, I have to confess, when I was speaking about dichotomies, that sometimes I am too romantic because when I speak about my people, my traditions, when I speak about the traditions when I grew up as a child, but we have to accept that life changes, that we need to adapt as human beings. But the milpa system and the forms how we cultivate corn, do they change? Are they constant? Do they change? What is it that makes it change if it has changed? And that's what I wanted to research in Santa Maria. This history is developed in the North Hill of the state of Oaxaca. To be able to understand how the practices have changed, I went to make a historical reconstruction on how things were done before and what is it that they do now, and what are the factors that have determined that there can be changes. Initially, in the 40s, it was a mining zone, and even the agricultures, now we're speaking about climate change, they would speak about natural phenomena, but they used to say that they could be self-sufficient. They could produce what they needed for all the year. Mining, as many families, they would diversify the labor for the family, carpentry. In the 50s came the program of parcelas to Mexico, which pushed a big wave of migration, and that's when we have the first detonate that affects the practices. People continue cultivating, but there is a flow of migration. There starts to be a different financial income. In the 60s, the mine closes, then the people starts migrating, looking for other ways of life, and they go to the cities, not only the United States, even the country continues to be an essential activity, being in the country. As the migration started, then the women started to concentrate more as part of the core of the family. To the 70s, the migration continues. They continue. Few families continue planting on the high parts. What happens here? We were speaking a while ago about the influence that the public policies have. What happens in Mexico is that at some point, with the neoliberal policies, we thought that the agricultures were going to take away. They were going to take it to houses. So we expected the farmers to go to the cities and integrate other types of markets, and yeah, that's what happened. But I think that when this was planned, they wouldn't look in the long term what the effect was going to be on people. People start to interact more with the exterior environment. The fertilizers, for example, when you ask the agriculturists why they use fertilizers, they would tell me that it nourished my plant, but there was never really a study to determine if it was true that the soil and the plant had those requirements. Other programs come in, focus on the development on capabilities like carpentry. To the 90s, what we see is that a small percentage is cultivating the land. In the high part of the mountains, there's not so many people. The people buy corn. Why do we plant if we have enough income? If we cultivate, but they're not self-sufficient anymore. They cultivate only for the most important rituals of the region. We continue mixing the traditional system of milpa with the fruit trees, but also including peach varieties, mixing them with the corn. But then come the 2000s. Temporal employment programs continue. There's money, so why do we want to plant? So let's just buy. They continue to plant in small quantities, but they're not self-sufficient anymore. The history changes after 2005. Why? First, we have the hurricane stand, which damages the ways, the roads, but people still have money to get some supplies of, get some corn from the mountains. And in 2007, we have the crisis of tortilla with the boom of the fuels in the United States, which causes an increase in the price of corn. Dryouts come, rains, and finally 2010 is the drop that spills the glass. With the hurricanes, two hurricanes have various storms. The principal bridge that communicated all the region of Oaxaca broke down, and so there's no food, no corn. We have money, but nowhere to buy. So they start questioning, saying, well, are we sovereign? So this is simply a map. It's like upside down, but the high part is aguas abajo, the lowest altitude, where most of the population is in the last years, and the most elevated part is where they lived initially, but when they went moving, when the, when the men migrate, women go with them. They come close to the towns so they can be close to their man. But what I have found so far is that there are this little yellow corn because the yellow corn was planted principally in the highest part, as well as the potatoes, and it's still part of their diet. There's some people that still plant yellow corn, but they are working to readapt their seeds. Other important thing is that initially, when they would work in the high part in Mexico, in Oaxaca, we have something called tequiohelagexa. What we do is that we have 5 people in the neighborhood. Tomorrow we plant in your plot, and then tomorrow in the neighbors, later in mine. When migration is a factor that changes the reality of community, then the TQs are not that effective. Then the social dynamics also change. I was telling you that then the community remains thoughtful, saying, "Well, we have money, but if we don't have food or what to buy, what are we going to do?" Then no, we have to go back and plant. So here starts a story that I like very much, which I call communitary improvement of milpa. Communitary because the community organizes and between themselves they have to recover all the seeds that they have, going to their neighbors, going to other communities to readapt their corns. And then they said, well, but the soil is tired, the rain patterns have changed. How do we do this? Here happens the encounter with an engineer that you see in the picture. His name is Humberto Castro. Humberto Castro was a corn improver of native corn. He would only focus on improving the plant. The history of this town and of Humberto is very interesting because we not only think as scientists that if somebody teaches you to grow soy, that you're only going to grow soy all your life. Only that? How do you adapt that to the context of the agricultures? So Humberto says that he realized that people not only needed to improve their seed, their native seed, he also goes to the practices. What are the practices? density of growing, spacing. If we have water, let us use the water, but all within a process negotiated with the agriculture, with the grower. So it was a bidirectional learning. So here what we see is a picture of the farmers in their fields, experimental fields. What they would do is to take the little seed, they would plant some lines of seeds, and at the end they collect the little school. When they finish the harvest, they they would choose the one that they would like the most, and they'll continue reproducing it. So what Umberto also taught them was to see, just like when we choose the guy or the girl that we like, he taught them what is the corn that you like the most, and which corn would you like to have. So he taught them how to grow the plants and also to be able to control the kind of plants that they wanted to have. This is the seed bank. The advantages they had is that the agriculture would said, well, if I lost my our harvest and I couldn't rescue any enough seed, okay, we have this bank. If I like my neighbor's bank, I can ask him to give me a little, and if he doesn't have enough, and then I'll go to the bank and take the seed from there. Next, please. When I was talking of the reconfiguration of milpa, more or less this picture shows us that initially the picture that you see that's like the 80s shows that initially they would put 5 seeds of maize, beans, and potatoes 90 centimeters away from each other. And Umberto would tell them, no, 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 but we have to increment production, so we have to reduce the space. We're going to put less seeds because imagine that your soil, that your plot is like a mother, the mother of some cats. If she feeds 5, it's gonna be hard for her. But if she feeds 3, it's gonna be easier for her. But they would tell Umberto, if you tell us it's about maximizing, then well, let's plant if 20 centimeters. So what is better, 40 centimeters? What is your step? They started playing with different spacings. The most sacred symbol of this people is the water. The grandparents said that the meeple does not get watered. Milpa should be watered with the milpa water. Well, they said it's true, but we're struggling with all the dryouts that we have been having. We're not being disrespectful to our beliefs, but we're trying to adapt to this changing context.
sistemas de riego, ellos les llaman
They started implementing sprinkling systems to help the soil to, to produce the corn. And if you ask a specialist in sprinkling, they will say yes, it's a sprinkling system, but it's not really. They just play with what they have and they adapt it. Next, please. I was telling you they reconfigured the practices. They didn't do like a very precise management of the seeds. Now they use silos. For example, silos are made by artisans, local artisans, which also means that is handiwork is being generated locally. In this plot that you see on the left side, they don't use fertilizers, but just the traditional way they used to do. There are things we don't see when we speak about milpa, native corn, the intangible meanings. Here are 3 families. They still grow in the high part, as I mentioned to you before. They help one another, and they're maybe the last group that grows at 2,600, 2,700 meters above sea level. People say that when they go to plant in the earth with a little drink of mezcal, they have to give the Mother Earth and ask Mother Earth to please give abundance. They pour a little drink of this liquor, and it is done like that. The tortillas you see there, I was wondering why people they're supposed to be hosts, they don't have tortillas. The answer is that it's part of the interchange of biodiversity. All those who go there, they take their own tortillas, and on the comal that you say see there, you can tell the neighbor, so nice, nice texture. I like to have some of your seed, so that becomes into another interchange form. Well, the agriculture today became self-sufficient again from the 300 kilograms that they used to harvest before. They have grown to 1 tonnelade using their own seeds without having to change the milk so much, just making some little adjustments. And this story I presented as to show that not only the farmers are passive people that receive, we also as and scientific, we need to have the opening to learn from them, and so we can match the best of these two worlds. And with the maize that they have left over, they sell it with an added value. They keep the traditions. They have even started a corn fair that they celebrate every year. And what I heard 1 year ago is that there was people very enthusiastic saying maybe we would have to come back to the high part because it's also a sentiment of nostalgia of what we had in the past as children, the yellow corn that we used to have and the potatoes, but we don't have anymore. Milpa continues to be part of the social tissue. Why is this important? Because public policies have been normally oriented to a certain type of technologies. We need to open spaces so that other alternatives can be heard, local know-hows, local knowledges.
Nativas están adaptadas
In these cases, native seeds have been adapted to extreme environment, and we haven't been able to eradicate them. And that's a good thing. They're part of the sovereignty of our peoples. We have to understand the context, our dynamics, and we got to go adapting. Native seeds, in the end, are part of our cultural biodiversity. I want to close with a phrase by Nazaria from 2013. She's an anthropologist, and this is a phrase, Quechua, that when the mountains that surround you are your mother, the tree your grandfather, the rock your explorer, the just harvested potatoes your children, the plants your sisters, and you don't get away from them to protect them. It is like that for our cultures that we continue inhabiting in a landscape in which there's no space for separation and hierarchy. This is the life itself. Scientists, we can call that many names, biodiversity, many names, whatever. Thank you.